Welcome to Science Force, where science comes alive. Hello everyone, and a very warm welcome to today's explainer. When you picture a sunflower, you most likely imagine these vast, bright fields of vibrant yellow just turning their faces toward the sun. They're cheerful, they're beautifully colorful, and honestly, they seem incredibly innocent, don't they? But today, we're going to look right past those bright yellow petals and uncover a rather dark, toxic reality. We're going to explore how this seemingly simple flower is actually a hardcore, heavy metal-eating machine, completely capable of absorbing some of the most dangerous industrial pollution on our entire planet. Here is our journey for today. First, we'll establish the heavy metal threat, introduce our biological sponge, and then we're going to dive into the exact cellular cleaning mechanisms. After that, we'll explore real-world phytoremediation, including the very famous Chernobyl cleanup, before finally weighing the promises and limitations. Let's get started. 1. The heavy metal threat, a cellular villain. To really appreciate our botanical hero, we first need to understand the stubborn, toxic elements that are poisoning our Earth. So we're talking about dense, metallic elements here. Things like lead, cadmium, mercury, and arsenic that basically pour into our environment from industrial waste and mining. And the fundamental problem is that they absolutely refuse to naturally degrade. Now, usually, treating this kind of severe pollution means deploying heavy machinery, excavating thousands of tons of soil, or using really harsh, expensive chemicals. But scientists have tapped into a highly colorful, totally eco-friendly alternative right from nature's playbook, and it's called phytoremediation. Phyto simply means plant, and remediation means cleaning or correcting a problem. It's the literal process of using plants to pull pollutants right out of the environment. Now, what's really interesting and terrifying about this slide is the sheer scale of biological damage these metals cause. It's just staggering. For those of you studying life sciences or medicine, you'll recognize exactly how devastating this pathology is. When these elements accumulate in living organisms, they wreak absolute havoc. Lead directly damages the brain and bones. Cadmium and mercury trigger severe cardiovascular and respiratory disorders. And arsenic and chromium, well, they are insidious, causing direct DNA mutations and dramatically elevating cancer risks. This is exactly why getting these metals out of our soil and water is a matter of urgent public health. 2. The biological sponge. Which brings us to section 2. Meet the biological sponge, the botanical hero. To combat this devastating cellular villain, we turn to a very familiar bright flower known scientifically as Helianthus annuus, the common sunflower. You might be wondering, how does a bright, innocent-looking flower survive pulling toxic sludge out of the earth? Well, it comes down to a few specific superpowers. It has these deep, widespread roots acting like giant biological sponges. It grows incredibly rapidly, which means it produces a massive amount of biomass, the stems, the leaves, and those colorful flowers, which provides ample physical space to actually store the toxins it absorbs. Plus, it possesses an extremely high toxic tolerance and it's highly adaptable to hot, wet, and just really varied soils. From an evolutionary standpoint, it is built extraordinarily tough. Section 3. Cellular cleaning mechanisms. Inside the sunflower. We know it acts as a sponge, but how does it survive the poison? Let's look under the microscope. Let's move to and see how this builds. The magic happens across 4 precise biological stages, which is the core pathway of phytoremediation. Step 1 is root absorption. Step 2 is upward transport through the xylem. Step 3 is cellular detoxification. And finally, step 4 is permanent storage in the vacuoles. Let's break these down one by one. Looking closely at steps 1 and 2, heavy metals actually dissolve in soil water as ions, like lead 2 plus or cadmium 2 plus. The sunflower's microscopic root hairs maximize surface area, and specific membrane transport proteins literally grab these toxic heavy metal ions right out of the soil. Through both active and passive transport, the metals are dragged inside the plant. Once inside, they join the plant's transpiration stream, moving steadily upward through the xylem vessels right alongside the water and essential minerals. But here's the real challenge, right? These heavy metals are highly toxic to the plant's own cells too. To defend itself, the sunflower executes step 3. It produces highly specialized molecules, specifically phytochelatins and metallothioneins. You can basically think of these as tiny metal-locking proteins. They immediately bind to the heavy metal ions flowing up the stem, chemically neutralizing their toxicity and preventing them from completely destroying the plant's internal tissues. So the absolutely crucial point here is that the plant doesn't magically destroy the heavy metal. Elements like lead and cadmium can't just be erased from existence. Instead, the plant safely quarantines them. In step 4, those metal protein complexes are deposited directly into the vacuoles. Vacuoles act as microscopic cellular vaults or storage containers. Once locked away inside these vaults, the neutralized heavy metals are completely isolated, meaning they can't interfere with the plant's normal metabolic processes. The plant just keeps on growing, completely unfazed by the poison it just ate. It's brilliant. 4. Phytoremediation types. Methods of cleanup. Let's look at how environmental scientists practically apply these superpowers out in the real world. So we have two primary methods based on the environment. First is phytoextraction, which is used for solid soil. The sunflower roots absorb lead from the dirt, sending it up to accumulate in the massive biomass of the leaves and stems. Later, the whole plant is simply harvested. The second method is rhizofiltration. Rhizo just means roots. In this setup, sunflowers are actually grown hydroponically over contaminated industrial or radioactive wastewater. The massive root systems dangle directly into the water, acting as brilliant living filters that suck up the dissolved pollutants. Sometimes, however, the goal is not to extract the metals at all, but just to trap them. And that brings us to phytostabilization. Here, the sunflowers are planted so that their dense root networks can immobilize the heavy metals deep within the earth. This traps the contaminants really tightly in the soil, preventing them from washing away into our precious groundwater supplies and halting toxic soil erosion. 5. The Chernobyl cleanup. Moving on to section 5, the Chernobyl cleanup, a real-world victory. To truly understand the power of this process, we really have to look at one of the most famous historical applications in modern history. Following the catastrophic nuclear disaster at Chernobyl, massive amounts of radioactive contamination poisoned the land and the water. Scientists deployed a brilliantly simple solution. They literally planted sunflowers on floating rafts in the contaminated ponds. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer power of this biological machinery. The roots functioned as natural filters, successfully pulling highly dangerous radioactive isotopes like cesium-137 and strontium-90 straight out of the water. Just imagine it for a second. Bright, cheerful yellow flowers actively eating nuclear fallout to heal the earth. No way, right? But it's true. And today, we don't just use them for nuclear disasters. Sunflowers serve as a biological cleanup crew for everyday industrial applications all over the place. They are actively deployed to tackle lead from battery industry waste, chromium from leather tanning, nickel from chemical factories. They're basically silent solar-powered janitors cleaning up after our most toxic industries. Finally, Section 6, Promises and Limitations, the reality of phytoremediation. As incredible as this all sounds, we do have to bring our explainer back down to earth for a moment. First, the advantages are absolutely remarkable. It's incredibly environment-friendly and sustainable. It's a low-cost, really simple technology. There are no diesel-guzzling excavators required. The entire process uses sunlight as its primary energy source. It requires far fewer harsh chemicals, and as the plant grows, its root systems actively improve the overall quality and structure of the soil. It is a completely regenerative process. However, we must also acknowledge the limitations. The cleaning process is tied to biological growth, which means it is very slow, often taking multiple seasons to complete. Furthermore, roots only reach so far down, leaving deep contamination completely untreated. And while they are tough, excessive, overwhelming pollution will ultimately just kill the plant. But actually, scratch that. Perhaps the greatest limitation is the ultimate irony. Once the sunflower has absorbed all those heavy metals, the plant itself becomes classified as toxic waste. It can't be eaten by animals or composted. It has to be harvested and disposed of very, very carefully, often by controlled incineration. Which leaves us with a truly fascinating thought to conclude our explainer today. If a simple, everyday, vibrantly colored flower has the biological machinery to absorb the toxic fallout of our absolutely worst industrial disasters, what other profound ecological cures are just out there waiting for us, hiding in plain sight in the natural world? Thank you so much for joining me today, and keep exploring.
Thank you for watching Science Force.